Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Klingfield. I'm super excited to finally release CINEVISTA 210. This has been something that I've been working on for the last couple months, developing this look, something that I'm truly passionate about here, and I'm super excited to get it out to you guys. And I'm especially excited about this opportunity because I ended up partnering with Mason Charles and CINEVISTA to get this PowerGrade out to you guys. We've got it here on Moment's website. You can check it out already. It's live in the description below. Also, if you have purchased it, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it, and I'm so excited to see what you guys come up with using this PowerGrade CINEVISTA 210. This is going to be the PowerGrade tutorial where we go through every single node in the PowerGrade. It's going to be all chaptered for you, so you can go ahead and skip between different chapters. Also, with the purchase of the PowerGrade comes a PDF. This PDF is very helpful because if you rather read stuff or see the documentation of kind of why we did what we did with each node, you can read the PDF, but each PDF page will come at the bottom, will come with a little link that takes you to this video here where you can watch that section of whatever you're reading. And then you can keep reading and go back and forth. So choose however you want to do it there. And also make sure to check out Mason's work. He's an incredible filmmaker based in the LA area there, and I'm so excited to be able to partner with him for this and be able to release to you guys. So I'll link his channel also down in the description below, and also his Instagram. And if you do use this PowerGrade on your projects, I would love to see. I know Mason would also, so make sure to tag myself, Mason, and CINEVISTA, the Instagram page, so that we can repost your work and we can check it out and see what you use these PowerGrades and LUTs on your own work. If you have any questions as you're watching, drop them down in the comments. I'll reply to every single comment that I can, and I'm excited to chat with you guys about this PowerGrade and how you guys are able to use it in your own projects. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Once you purchase CINEVISTA 210, you're going to notice that you're going to get this folder here of a download. Let's open that up and see what comes in it. So here you've got 4 different things. You've got your LUTs, which I'm going to show you how to install. You're going to notice that each one has its own camera profile. And within each folder, you're going to have different things. So for example, for your red profile here, you've got 4 different LUTs based on the same PowerGrade. So if you just purchase the LUTs, this is how you're going to install them. You're going to have your base look, your dark look, your half, which is basically your base look at 50%, and then your mono, which is your monochromatic look. The next thing that you're going to notice here is your PowerGrades. This is going to be all the PowerGrades. If you purchase the PowerGrades, this is where you're going to get here. The next thing you're going to notice is your test footage folder. This one has a bunch of footage just so that you can do some practicing and you can follow along with the tutorial. The last one is your PDF tutorial. This PDF will be very helpful as you follow along. You're going to notice that you have a bunch of bookmarks here that takes you to different spots: expand, output, look development, that kind of thing. And if we go back to home, you'll also notice that you can also click on pretty much anything here. So if you want to install it, you can click on the installation. If you want to go back to the top, or if you want to click on some nodes, like if you want to know more about Halation, you can click on the Halation tab, and then you can read through different things about Halation, for example. And then at the bottom of each page, so let's go, for example, to Look Dev. At the bottom of Look Dev, you're going to notice that we have the video tutorial. If you click on this video tutorial section, it's going to take you to the section from this video so that you can follow along. So that's pretty helpful. So that's what comes in there. That's that PDF. So let's go ahead and start installing these ones as our first section of the tutorial. So we're going to need to open up DaVinci Resolve. I've got a template project file here, and we're going to just import first our footage. So I'm just going to grab my test footage. I'm going to pop it right onto footage here. And now we've got some footage to play with. You're going to notice that you're going to have a little bit more than this. This is just some sample stuff that we're going to use for today, but you're going to have some other stuff to play around with different camera profiles. The next thing we want to do here is install our LUTs. So before we do that, I just want to show you some settings here. These settings are going to be important as you follow along, just to make sure that what you see on your screen is what I'm seeing on my screen. The first thing you're going to change is you're going to go to your color management. You want to make sure that this is a DaVinci Y RGB. It probably already says that, but just make sure it doesn't say color managed. That's a different thing. We're going to stay to DaVinci Y RGB. The next thing you want your timeline color space to say DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, okay? And then your output color space is going to be Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. The other thing that I always change is I go to my general options, and you're going to notice that a couple settings here look a little different. So the first one here is Luminance Mixer defaults to 0. I always set this to 0. If you don't have this set to 0, that's okay. The PowerGrade is configured to work in both scenarios, but just so you know, I like having this set to 0. The next thing we're going to do is install our LUTs. So let's go to color management and drop down to where it says open LUT folder. That's going to open your LUT folder. This is where all the LUTs are being stored in your computer. So I'm going to keep that there, and I'm just going to minimize to my desktop. And we're going to have both folders. We're going to have this one open here, which is where your LUTs are going to go. And this is the purchased LUTs. So I'm going to open the LUT folder here. You're going to notice that I have CINEVISTA here. This is the first iteration of CINEVISTA that came out, I think it was earlier this year. So you're going to notice here, if you already purchased it, you're going to have a folder called CINEVISTA. This one here is different, CINEVISTA 210. So the way we're going to do that is you can either drag it or just copy it. In this case, I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to go into the LUT folder and I'm just going to paste it. And you're going to notice that it's going to just put it right next to CINEVISTA right here as 210. And inside of it's going to be all the different camera profiles. We go back to DaVinci Resolve here, and now we're going to go to the color tab. Once you're in the color tab, you're going to notice here you have CINEVISTA. All we have to do is right click and we're going to click refresh. And now you're going to have the new folder here called CINEVISTA 210. And within there, you have all your different camera profiles. So for example, if I want to do something like, let's do Panasonic Vlog. This is some Panasonic Vlog. This is some cool footage from my friend David. He sent this footage to me so that we can include it in the PowerGrade. Thank you so much, David, for that. We're going to go ahead and do something here. So we'll go Panasonic and click Panasonic, and then this one here is the Vlog. As you can see here, as I hover, it tells you which one each one is, CINEVISTA 210 Panasonic Vlog, and we can just double click on that, and then there you go. So that's the dark version, and then we can just click the base. That's the normal one. I like setting these ones, since there's 4 versions of each one, I like setting it so that you can see all 4. So as you can see here, I got 2, 3, and then 4. That way it keeps it organized. So if I'm going to be here in S-Log, this one here, for example, let's find our little hero shot right about there. Now I can see the bottom line is all Sony S-Log. So we can go and try. This is our base look. This is our dark look. This is our half. So half intensity of the base, basically. And then this is our monochromatic look. Okay, let's jump back into here and install our PowerGrades. What we're going to do is go to Gallery. I already have them installed, but I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to right click here and add PowerGrade album, and we can call it CINEVISTA 210, okay? And then you can click import. The way we're going to do it today is I'm just going to open this folder since we already had it open and go back one step to our PowerGrades. And then what you can do is install all of them, or you can install just the ones that you're going to be using. In this case, I'm going to install all of them so we have them there for reference. So I'm going to start from the top. My DRX, you want to grab the DRX, not the JPEG or DXP or DPX. These are just some files here in case you want to recreate the PowerGrade and you want to make sure that you include the proper JPEG. You can do that by using the JPEG and then creating a new still with your own PowerGrade. But let's use the DRX and go and import those. So I'm going to just do that right now. All right, so once you've installed it, we can close this now. We won't need that for the rest of the video. And you're going to notice that they're all here. Okay, so if you can't really read it, let's say for example, the name is a little long sometimes, so it's hard to read. You can do a couple things. You can either make it nice and big until you can read it, or you can just use the included picture where you can kind of read what it says here, S-Log 3. One thing I want to do here is just sort them by name so I know what they are. So instead of still ID, we're going to go by label, and that's just going to sort them by alphabetical order. So we're going to start from ASUS all the way to S-Log 3. Okay, so those are the ones. I'm just going to make them a little smaller so I can get 3 tiles. All right, so let's start with the first one. I'm going to go to a shot here, and let's find again our hero shot, which is right about there. And we're going to go ahead and apply it. So the way you do that is make sure you're in S-Log 3. You find S-Log 3 here, and you right click it and you click Apply Grade. And now you've got it applied right there. And we're going to go through each node here in just a minute. The other way that you can do it a little bit faster is by clicking with the middle mouse click button. So I'm going to click the middle button, and that's going to automatically apply it like that. And I'm going to apply this S-Log to all the S-Log footage. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do that by clicking S-Log 3 to all the other things that are S-Log like that. And I'm going to use the middle click button and click on this one here. And that's just going to say, do you want to replace them? And I say yes. So now all my footage has been replaced with the PowerGrade. As you can see, everything's been graded. Everything that's S-Log has been graded with this right here. So these are all the nodes that come in the PowerGrade. The first one here is your DWG. This is a simple CST, color space transform, that transfers basically your footage, what it used to be, the log footage, into what is now an intermediate working space. So I'm going to show you what that means. So if I turn everything off here, this is our log. And if I turn this on, it just looks like more log. Basically what it's doing, it's turning our camera log into a intermediate space, which is called DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. So once we change into that, that's where you can change your camera. So for example, let's say you're shooting with S-Log2. You can change that to S-Log2, and S-Log2 usually has S-Gamut, so there we go. But let's say, for example, you shot S-Log2 and you didn't shoot with S-Gamut. You can change that right here, and you can change to whatever camera you're shooting in. In this case, again, we're shooting with S-Log3, S-Gamut3.cine. So there we go. So now we're in a DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate space. So that's very important to know. And then I'm going to skip a little bit here so you can see what's actually happening under all the PowerGrade. You have your output node right here in the middle. If we turn that output node here on, you're going to notice your image goes to normal. And inside your output, if you just double click it, you're going to notice that you have your, again, your Rec 79 Gamma 2.4. So we're going from our intermediate space into Rec 79 Gamma 2.4. And this is where you could change your output. For example, if you wanted to change to Gamma 2.2, because that's what a lot of our monitors are on, you could do that here, and it's going to update it here. So that's where you can change your output for delivery. And we've got a couple of things that we'll talk about when we get to that node. So let's go back and reset it to our Sony S-Log. Close that and close that. The next node that you're going to notice is the camera exposure node. This one here is basically one way that you can change your exposure that is as close to what it would look like changing your exposure in your camera. And this is pretty close. I tested this out and it's actually quite accurate as to stops. So if you wanted to go 2 stops over, you could put that in there and that's going to go 2 stops over. Or let's say you shot 2 stops overexposed on the scene and you wanted to bring that back down to -2. That's how you could bring that down. In this case, I find that this is a little dark, so we're just going to bring that right back up to maybe negative 0.15. Something like that looks good to me. So now that we have our camera exposure, we can move on to the next one. If your image is a little noisy, in this case we have our grain turned on, I'm going to turn it off. This image is not grainy, but if it did have a lot of grain and I wanted to turn it off, this is where you can turn on noise reduction, and noise reduction will be able to bring that noise down. The next thing that we're going to see is a super fun node, which is the lens effects. I'm going to turn that on. You're going to see it does some really cool stuff to the image here. Inside the node, you've got 4 different things. So let's go and turn them off and see each one and what it does. The first one is barrel distortion. This one comes in 2. The first one uses a simple barrel distortion effect right here, lens distortion. And then this zoom just zooms in that image to remove that black edge there. The next one is chromatic aberration. This is already pretty subtle. You'll notice that nothing much happened there, but it does add some subtle chromatic aberration. This I modeled after some old Canon FD lenses that I have. You'll notice that this one has already chromatic aberration here. This one here was not shot with the Canon FD, so it doesn't have that. So if you want to add it, you can do it using your chromatic aberration, and you can tweak them here and make it more or less. The next one here is your edge blur. What you want to do here is we're going to turn both of these on at the same time. So this one here is the mask that feeds into the edge blur, and it uses it so that it incrementally gets more blurred depending on where the mask is. The edge blur has all the settings. So here we're going to increase the blur just a lot so you can see what's happening here. If I go to my mask and I start moving this around, you're going to notice that it increases where the blur mask is. So I'm going to reset that and go back to here. Obviously that's way too much, so we're going to take it down to something like that. So this one here is a very subtle effect, but when done right, it can really add some cool stuff on the edges. The last one here is bloom. This one here is going to just very subtly bloom your highlights here. You notice that that highlight just bloomed. Turn that off, turn it back on, and that you can control by going onto your key and just bringing that up if you want more, or down if you want less. The next one is halation. Let's go ahead and work with this one here. This one shows halation quite well. Now we're going to zoom in and we're going to look at our halation. This looks beautiful. So let's turn halation off and back on. So that's the effect that's happening there. Now, if you don't have the studio version, you can just switch to the bottom one. Grab that there and just swap those. And now, I mean, nothing looks like it changed. It's very, very similar. In some cases, it actually looks better because it looks a little sharper, the image. So you can use the bottom one, and this one just uses some basic tools from DaVinci Resolve, and it does pretty much the same thing. So you have a couple settings here that you can change. Everything here looks good for basic stuff and looks good most of the time, but if you do want to change something, you can change it in here. This is one little tick that I really like. If you click this here, highlight only, it will just kind of remove some of the stuff that is not in the highlights. And then here you've got some other things like the amount. We can turn that amount down or higher. Here you've got your radius. This is how far from the inside it goes. Try not to change this one too much. You can definitely overdo it pretty easily, so try not to go too high on that because that does not look normal. The other thing here is your saturation. This one here basically turns saturation off or back on. And your hue, you can go more greenish or more reddish depending on your taste. The next one here is film effects. I'm going to change images from here so we can see it a little bit better. I'm going to go to something dark. Let's use this one here, for example. So this is the damage effect. So the damage here, first one, adds a little bit of speckles to the image. So you're going to notice that it already is quite low. The key output is set to gain of 0.150. So if I just increase that to 1, you're going to notice that as I scrub through, little white speckles should show up. There's one. So you see that little white dot there? That is our damage. So if I turn that on and off, you're going to notice that that little white spot is kind of like the dust that you would see on old film. So you can control the output here by just blending that to whatever you like. What we have found is that if we put 1.150, that seems to just do enough where you don't really notice it, but it's still there, and it just adds the right amount of texture to your image. The next one here is your gate weave. This is where your image just shakes a little bit like old film. The way we did that here is if we go to Film Look Creator, which is here, and we scroll all the way down to the Film Gate Weave, we're going to notice here that it's turned on. So if I turn that off, you're not going to notice anything change, but it is slightly moving your image up and down in a jittery motion. So if I found a shot here that is shot on a tripod, this one I know was shot on a tripod, so let's go ahead and do that one. So if I turn that on like that, you're going to notice that if I increase the amount to a lot, you're going to notice what happens here. You see that there on the edges. Let's do that again. Look here on the edges here. If I zoom in, you're going to notice that it kind of shakes a little bit. There it is. So that little shake here is what's happening, and that's your gate weave. So we can turn that down here a little bit less. You don't want it to be too obvious, but something like that where it just kind of shakes a little bit. The next node we're going to notice here is the grain. This one here, you're going to notice there are two options. You've got your grain on the top and the grain on the bottom one. The top one here is just a subtle grain. Let's zoom into something where we can see. It's got a little bit of a light texture here with a little bit of saturation, and it's pretty soft. The one underneath it here is a little bit more harsh. This one's more less saturation, and it's a little bit more gritty. So as you can see, the image just gets a lot more gritty with that one. But what's really cool about this one is if we go inside of it, you'll notice that it's labeled CINEVISTA. So CINEVISTA grain here, if you purchase the other PowerGrades from CINEVISTA, this grain here is the same grain that is used in the other PowerGrades. So you can have consistent grain across your projects if you use this grain here. The new grain here is just a soft grain. It's a little bit lighter, a little softer, and it's got a little bit more saturation in there. Here we've got two settings here. Also, you've got your sharpen and you've got your film blur. These ones here are helpful if you want to sharpen or blur your image a little bit. We can start with a sharpen one. This one sharpens the image just a little bit. You're going to notice in the leaves there, it just barely sharpens it a little bit. And this one blurs it. So if we go here, you notice that it blurs the image just a little bit. Okay, so that's the grain section. Let's move on to the next section here, the vignette. This is a nice light subtle vignette that if you turn on, you're going to notice on the edges, it just barely turns that on there. That's off and that's on. If you want a little bit more vignette, you can go into your key output and just turn that up to whatever you would like. The next one here is your exposure and contrast. This is we're getting into everything that is specific to each shot. So if we want to change each shot, you're going to notice that everything's also color labeled, which is helpful to know what it means. Here you're going to notice that this is all camera prep stuff. So camera prep here, this is the beige color, camera prep and camera prep. Anything that is effects will be purple. This is purple effects with ratio, which is purple, which is an effect. Anything that's camera specific will be green. So these are all the effects that you're going to do on each specific shot, depending on what shot you are. And anything that's look development will be in orange. So everything in here is orange. So that helps you be able to quickly, at a glance, be able to know what each node does. So exposure and contrast. This one here, usually what I do is once I've set my camera exposure to what I know is correct here, I do some stuff with my color wheels here. So either I increase my gain, or I add more contrast with my gamma, or I can use these contrast wheels, or I can do my lift. So this is where you would control some of those contrast exposure ratios. What I like to do here is try to keep this node here to anything that is just luminance values. So no color values in here. So try not to touch these ones and changing these values, That way you can keep two things separate. You can keep everything that happens in exposure here and anything that happens in color in the white balance node. And that keeps it different. Because sometimes what happens is if you're tweaking things here and you're going and you're adding some colors and then you add some darkness and some contrast levels here. And let's go ahead and do something like that. And then you say, ooh, I love the really contrasty image, but I don't love how yellow it is. Now you've got yourself a little stuck because they're in the same node. Whereas if you do them separately, here you can start dialing in your contrast like that. And here you can do your color adjustments like that. If you want to reset your exposure, for example, but you want to keep your oranges, that's totally fine. So that's why it's helpful to keep them separate. Now, there's a lot of tutorials on how to tweak an image specifically, but the basic things that I will say and recommend is use your primer wheels for your exposures and your contrast. And then for your white balance, you're going to use mostly your offset or your gain wheel. These are going to be great for anything white balance. If you rather stick to something more simple, you can use your temp and tint sliders. This is very similar to something you'd find on maybe a phone app or on Lightroom. This is very simplistic where you can change more orange or more blue, but it doesn't have quite the control that an offset wheel will have. The next thing here you're going to notice is your output. But before that, you're going to notice that your look development is happening right before them. So I like keeping that separate here so that it's easy to access. That is your look development here. You're going to notice that it has two outputs. Your top one here is your color, and your bottom one is your black and white. Okay? So when you notice here on the top one, if you want to change the intensity of the look, let's say you love everything that looks, but it looks a little intense in some images, you can just go to the key output and just go ahead and dial that down. So I'm going to dial it down to 0.5, which is 50%, and that is 50% of the image. Now I'm going to show you here what is really cool. If I dial that down to 0, what's actually happening is you're just converting your S-Log footage into a Rec. 79 footage. So this here is all the look is happening in this look dev. So the more you increase this, the more look you're going to get, and the less you're going to get more of a normal Rec. 79 image. So let's go back in there and turn that to 100%. Now that we're in here, you're going to notice that there's a couple different nodes here. We're going to start with the blue and yellow. These are some custom curves. The blue adds some blue, as you can imagine, to the image, along with some yellow to the highlights. You're going to notice that if I turn that off, it does add some warmth to the highlights along with some blues to the shadows. It's a really cool curve, and I really like it. Here you can increase it by having more in the key output or less here. You can just kind of control that there. The yellow does the same thing, but just adds yellow to the highlights. So if I turn that off, I just get the blue image. This one adds some warmth. And again, I can increase that here and less. So if we go to our highlights here, outside, and I increase that, we're gonna get a lot more yellow and a lot more blue. So you can do that. That usually is set, I think, at 0.4. The next one is the film fade. This one here fades your image a little bit. It brings up those blacks. If I go back to my parade, you're gonna notice that I'm increasing those blacks if I turn that on, just by a little bit. So it kind of crushes those blacks and it gives you a little bit of a faded look. You're gonna notice in my pants here, off and on. And if you want more, you can of course increase it. It's at 50%. I'm gonna set that to 1, and it just fades those black very, very subtly. The next one here is your F curve. This one's super cool because this one here is your main custom curve. So this is gonna add most of the contrast into your image. So if you wanna change your curve, you can do that by maybe decreasing it through using your key output. And that's how you can affect your curve. The next thing is your look. This one here is your look development. You've got lots of different things here. You've got your hue, saturation, and luminance. I'm not gonna go into each one, but you can tweak them here if you want. Then you've got a green alt. I really like this one here. If I go into a different clip that's got greens, and I go into my look development here, and I turn off my green alt, you're gonna notice that my greens over here are gonna go a little bit more yellow. So you've got two different versions. You've got this green and that green. And it's kind of cool to know in case you want to just quickly see which one you like better. I usually like it on better, but you have both options. The next one here is your density. So you're going to notice that inside my look dev, the next one is density. If you turn that off, you're going to notice that just the density of the image, that's kind of like that saturation and how dense the colors are, just changes a little bit. So that's without it, and that's with it on. And this uses a really cool method that I learned on Cullen's channel, where you basically turn it into HSV and only use the middle one, the saturation value. And by affecting your gain here and sometimes your gamma, you can change the saturation and density of the colors in a very filmic way. So if I increase my gain, you're going to notice that as I increase it, I get more saturation. Same with my gamma. The gamma is a little bit more quick to respond. You can increase that saturation in a really cool way. Same thing, if we want to remove it, you can go the opposite way here. Then you've got, of course, these two down here, and these are for the black and white. You've got your contrast curve along with it turning black and white. So that's pretty simple down here. So if you want a quick black and white, that's a quick way to get black and white. All right, so the next one here is our output. So the output here, this is, again, like I was saying, you get to choose which output you want to do. So if you want to change your output to something specific and you want to change the output, this is where you would do those changes here. The other ones that you have are, you've got the middle one, which just changes the colors into a different kind of color profile where I think it looks really cool. Just a really neat thing that I saw someone do. So I included it in here where it just changes the colors into an RE wide gamut and uses the RE LUT included in DaVinci Resolve, and it just gets a really pleasing color. So you can kind of play between the two, either the normal one here or this one here. And one of my favorites one is the bottom one. If I use the bottom one here, it uses a color space transform and transform your image into Cineon Film Log. Now, Cineon Film Log is an interesting one because this is kind of what it would look like if you actually shot film and you scanned it. This is what it would come looking like after it got scanned. So now we can apply some LUTs that would normally be applied to scanned film. For example, the ones that are included in DaVinci Resolve. So if I go in here and I right click that and go LUTs, you're going to notice that in the film looks, you have lots of already built-in DaVinci Resolve free LUTs that are for print film. So the one that I chose, my favorite one, is 2383 D60. So if I turn that one on, it's just going to have a totally different look. Pretty cool look that you can apply there, and you can start combining different things. So that's a pretty neat way to do it. So for example, if I want to use that print LUT and I want to then turn my look dev, I can grab that and turn that down, and then you can start combining different looks. So now let's warm this up because it's a little cold now. And that just gives you a totally different look. You can choose different print LUTs, or even, actually this is a really cool thing, let me reset it. If you want to combine this PowerGrade along with, if you purchase CINEVISTA, the first version, what you can do actually is go into here, turn this one on, go into here, and then we're just going to apply, if we go to CINEVISTA, the first one, and we apply one of these LUTs, we can now combine the original CINEVISTA 148 and then this CINEVISTA color 210, and we combine and make a totally new color. So this is a little strong in my opinion, so I'm going to turn the look dev down, but now you've got a combination of looks. You've got the original CINEVISTA, which that's the original, along with the 210, and now we can start playing with two different colors, and you can do combinations, and it's a pretty cool way to be able to combine different nodes. The next one is your expand. So let's go back to the first one. There it is. Your expand node here is a great way to do something after it's been converted into Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. So be careful not to do severe things here and then change your output to something else, because then it's not going to be the same. The reason I like to do this after is because it's easier to control your clipping point after it's already been converted, and I'll show you why. If I go to exposure contrast here, and let's say I want to try to effect and bring my lift down. When I bring my lift, you're going to notice that my lift goes to here and it kind of crushes in a very smooth way. You're going to notice that it kind of all just crushes into that. See that there? Very smoothly. Now, if I keep that there and I do the same exact thing but now in the expand, it works in a much more kind of a linear way of thinking. You see that it doesn't crush it, it actually just goes past the black. So it clips the blacks a lot faster. You're going to notice down here, it's just clipping them and it's not rolling them. So there's just two ways to handle it. Sometimes if you want to just control your black clipping point, what I would do is go to my exposure here and I bring that down to there. And then I can bring my expand node, go to log wheels and turn my shadow just so it starts clipping the blacks. And that's how you can affect that. Same with your highlights. If you want to just bring your highlights up, you can easily do that in the expand node by just bringing that up like that. And that's how you can change your clipping point. And then you can go into your exposure node and then bring your exposure up, and you've got a new clipping point over here, there. So if I turn that off, you can notice that I'm changing my clipping point by moving my expand node. So that's what can happen there. Printer light works a little bit similar to the white balance. It just happens after. So what you can do here is use your offset wheels similar to what we did in the white balance, but it does act slightly different. So I'm going to show you how it acts different. If I do it here and I'm changing my white balance here, to make it nice and orangey, and I copy those settings. I'm just going to reset that and put them over here in printer lights. You're going to notice that it does change how it looks. So that's before, and this is after. So there's a neat way of being able to change your white balance and your printer lights by deciding if you're going to have them before or after. The next node here is your saturation control. I love having saturation control right at the end because this controls your saturation overall. If you want to take the saturation out, it's a neat way to do it at the end because it takes all the saturation out. So you can go back to black and white image. So if I turn that down like that, then we've got a less saturated image. Whereas if I did the saturation edit, for example, in the white balance node, and I turn down all the saturation, you would be left with this kind of sepia looking colored image. You see how that's not true black and white? If I turn the saturation here off, you notice that you do have a little bit of a difference there. You can still control the saturation here. So it doesn't have a very intuitive way of working, whereas if you do it at the end, it does make sense the most. If you want to increase saturation, you can also do it here, but I usually do it inside my look dev and density node. This saturation control also is a great place to add your color slice tool. If you want to do some quick last minute edits for skin tones, you can do that right here. Or if you want to change your green, maybe your hue of green, that's a great place to add it just at the end as a little final trim pass. But if you want to do any severe changes to color, I would stay away from the color slice and instead go into look dev, into the look, and change them within the hue, saturation, and luminance here. And the last node here is your ratio node. So if we turn that on here, it just adds a ratio, and you can change your ratio by going into effects, go all the way down to film gate, and here you can change it by changing this setting here. So you can change it to 16 mil, or you can change it to Super 8, or you can change it to your own. Let's say you want to change to 1.33, you can do that right there, or you want to change it to 2, and that would give you your black bars there, or I think it's like 2.35, you can change it to that, and that's where you can change that film gate. So that's a pretty cool way to do that. 1.33, I like there. And then you can also enable your curvature. So if you want to have some curvature there, or if you want to add some padding, that's a really neat way to do that at the end. All right, so we got through all the nodes here. So now before we go, I just wanted to go through a couple shots here and just quickly grade them here with you so you can see how I would normally grade something like this. So let's go ahead and start from the beginning. I'll start nice and fresh. I'm going to apply S-Log3. And that already looks quite good. Let's go ahead and find, I liked finding like a hero shot, so something like that. This was shot with a Helios lens, as you can see with the bokeh behind it. So our blacks are pretty lifted. So one thing I might do is just maybe change this down a little bit, bring that down just a little bit. Maybe bring my face so I can see my face. And then I'm gonna just increase the contrast. So I'm gonna bring the log wheels, so bring my shadows down just a little bit and bring that gamma up a little bit more. Then go to my expand node, grab my log and bring my log down so that it clips right where I want it, right about there. It's just kind of playing between the two. Bring that down a little bit, maybe too much. Something like that looks quite good. So that's before and after. As you can see, we added a little bit more contrast. And then we can do some final passes on their saturation. Maybe I'll take the saturation down just a little bit, 48. That looks good. And then I can do some quick tweaks on the color slice. So for example, the greens, for example, if I want to take those down a little bit, I can do that right here. Maybe swing them one way or the other. Not severe, just gonna tweak them that way like that. A little bit of density to my greens. Maybe I wanna take my skin down just a little bit. There, that looks pretty good to me. When we try this one here, this one's quite blue, but I really like this shot because if I move, when my sun moves right out of the way, we get this really cool flare right there. So it goes from a little bit of a colder shot to a warmer shot. So let's go stand on the colder section. We're gonna bring it down just a little bit. I'm gonna warm it up a bit, not too much. Let's take a look at before and after. And let's do one more here before we go. Let's do this one, I like this shot. So if we reset it, I think it's already reset. There we go. I think that's almost perfect. So maybe I'd warm it up a little bit, but I kind of like how blue it was. Maybe I'd push it even further. This is a good example as to an intention. If I go to my vector scope, you're gonna notice that we're pretty heavy on the blue side, but maybe we don't wanna completely neutralize it because then it kind of removes the magic of that moment where it was actually very blue moment. So that already looks quite great. So I think I might leave it there. Maybe I'll darken it up a bit. And often when I'm color grading, I don't actually want all the film effects. And you can easily turn those off, of course, and have just a nice clean image. There's your clean image without anything turned on. These are your effects. Again, you can remember your effects are anything purple. So if we want all the effects turned on or all the effects turned off, you can just look for anything that's purple. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. It is my pleasure to get this PowerGrade out to you guys. It is something I'm truly passionate about. So if you do end up using it in your own projects, I would love to see it. Send me a DM, tag us in whatever you do with this. I'd love to see your projects. I've already enjoyed being able to see everybody's projects that have been able to test this out in the beta release. And it's just so exciting for me to be able to see this PowerGrade being used in different projects, from documentaries to some side projects to some YouTube videos, some test videos. It's just super cool for me to be able to see this. Mason also made a really cool video where he shows before and after images using the CINEVISTA 210 PowerGrade on his channel. So I'm gonna link that here. Make sure to go check that out. It's gonna be a really cool video where it shows before and after of using CINEVISTA 210. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.